sorely as Marie, who had ideas of her own about this story, begged Godpapa Drosselmeyer to go on with it, he would not be persuaded, but jumped up, saying, "Too much of a time wouldn't be good for you. The rest tomorrow." Just as Drosselmeyer was going out of the door, Fritz said, "I say, Godpapa Drosselmeyer, was it really you who invented mousetraps?" "How can you ask such silly questions?" cried his mother. But Drosselmeyer laughed oddly and said, "Well, oh. You know, I'm a clever clockmaker. Mousetraps had to be invented sometime or other." And with that, he left. But the next evening, Godpapa Drosselmeyer said, "And now you know, children, why it was the Queen took such precautions about her little Perlipet. Had she not always the fear before her eyes of Dame Mousewink coming back and carrying out her threat of biting the princess to death? Drosselmeyer's ingenious machines were of no avail against the clever, crafty Dame Mousewink, and nobody save the court astronomer, who was also state astrologer and reader of the stars, knew that the family of the cat Purr had the power to keep her at bay. This was the reason why each of the lady nurses was obliged to keep one of the sons of that family, each of whom was given the honorary rank and title of Privy Councillor of Legation, in her lap, and render his onerous duty less irksome by gently scratching his back. One night, just after midnight, one of the chief nurses stationed close to the cradle woke suddenly from a profound sleep. Everything lay buried in slumber, not a purr to be heard, deep, death-like silence, so that the death watch ticking in the wainscot sounded quite loud. What were the feelings of this principal nurse when she saw close beside her a great hideous mouse standing on its hind legs, with its horrid head laid at the princess's face? She sprang up with a scream of terror. Everybody awoke, but then Dame Mousewink, for she was the great big mouse in Perlipet's cradle, ran quickly away into the corner of the room. The Privy Councillors of Legation dashed at her, but too late. She was off and away through a chink in the floor. The noise awoke Perlipet, who cried terribly, "Heaven, heaven be thanked, she's still alive!" cried all the nurses. But what was their horror when they looked at Perlipet and saw that the beautiful, delicate little thing had turned into an enormous, bloated head, instead of the pretty little golden-haired one at the top of a diminutive, crumpled-up body, and green, wooden-looking eyes staring where the lovely azure blue pear had been, whilst her mouth had stretched across from one ear to the other. Of course, the Queen nearly died of weeping and loud lamentation, and the walls of the king's study had all to be hung with padded arras, because he kept on banging his head against them, crying, "Oh, wretched king mine! Oh, wretched king that I am!" Of course, he might have seen then, and it would have been much better to eat his puddings with no fat in them at all, and let Dame Mousewink and her folk stay on under the hearthstone. But Perlipet's royal father did not think of that. what he did was to lay all the blame on the court clockmaker and arcanist, Christian Elias Drosselmeyer of Nuremberg, wherefore he promulgated a sapient edict to the effect that said Drosselmeyer should within the space of 4 weeks restore Princess Pirlipat to her pristine condition, or at least indicate an unmistakable and reliable process whereby that might be accomplished, or else suffer a shameful death by the axe of the common headsman. Drosselmeyer was not a little alarmed, but he soon began to place confidence in his art and in his luck, so he proceeded to execute the first operation, which seemed to him to be expedient. He took Princess Pirlipat very carefully to pieces, screwed off her hands and feet, and examined her interior structure. Unfortunately, he found that the bigger she got, the more deformed she would be, so that he didn't see what was to be done at all. He put her carefully together again, sank down beside her cradle, which he wasn't allowed to go away from, in the deepest dejection. The 4th week had come. Wednesday of the 4th week, when the king came in with eyes gleaming with anger, made threatening gestures with his scepter, and cried, "Christian Elias Drosselmeyer, restore the princess, or prepare for death." Drosselmeyer began to weep bitterly. The little princess kept on cracking nuts, an occupation which seemed to afford her much quiet satisfaction. For the first time, the arcanist was struck by Pirlipat's remarkable appetite for nuts, and the circumstance that she had been born with teeth, and the fact had been that immediately after her transformation she had begun to cry, and she had gone on crying till by chance she got hold of a nut. She at once cracked it and ate the kernel, after which she was quite quiet, and from that time her nurses found that nothing would do but to go on giving her nuts. Oh, holy instinct of nature, eternal, mysterious, inscrutable interdependence in things, cried Drosselmeyer. Thou pointest out to me the door of the secret. I'll knock, it shall be opened unto me. He at once begged for an interview with the court astronomer, and was conducted to him closely guarded. They embraced with many tears, for they were great friends, and then retired into a private closet where they referred to many books treating of sympathies, antipathies, and other mysterious subjects. Night came on. The court astronomer consulted the stars, and with the assistance of Drosselmeyer, himself an adept in astrology, drew the princess's horoscope, and this was an exceedingly difficult operation, for the lines kept getting more and more entangled and confused for ever so long. But at last, oh, what joy! It lay plain before them that all the princess had to do to be delivered from the enchantment which made her so hideous and get back her former beauty was to eat the sweet kernel of the nut Cracker took. Now, this nut Cracker took had a shell so hard that you might have fired a 48-pounder at it without producing the slightest effect on it. Moreover, it was essential that this nut should be cracked in the princess's presence by the teeth of a man whose beard had never known a razor, who never had on boots. This man had to hand the kernel to her with his eyes closed and he might not open them till he had made 7 steps backwards without a stumble. Drosselmeyer and the astronomer had been at work on this problem uninterruptedly for 3 days and 3 nights, and on the Saturday the king was sitting at dinner when Drosselmeyer, who was to have been beheaded on the Sunday morning, burst in joyfully to announce that he had found out what had to be done to restore Princess Pirlipat to her pristine beauty. The king embraced him in a burst of rapture and promised him a diamond sword, 4 decorations, and 2 Sunday suits. "Set to work immediately after dinner," the monarch cried out kindly. "Oh, take care, dear Arcanist, that the young unshaven gentleman in shoes, and that the Nutcracker took already in his hand, is on the spot. And be sure that he touches no liquor beforehand, so that he mayn't trip up when he makes his 7 backward steps like a crab. Oh, he can get as drunk as a lord afterwards if he likes." Drosselmeyer was dismayed at this utterance of the king's, and stammered out, not without trembling and hesitation, that though the remedy was discovered, both the Nutcracker took and the young gentleman who was to crack it had still to be searched for, and that it was matter of doubt whether they would ever be found at all. Oh! The king, greatly incensed, whirled his sceptre round his crowned head and shouted in the voice of a lion, "Very well, then. You must be beheaded." It was exceedingly fortunate for the wretched Drosselmeyer that the king had thoroughly enjoyed his dinner that day, and was consequently in an admirable temper, and disposed to listen to the sensible advice which the queen, who was very sorry for Drosselmeyer, did not hesitate to give him. Drosselmeyer took heart, and represented that he really had fulfilled the conditions, discovered the necessary measures, and gained his life consequently. The king said this was all bosh and nonsense, but at length, after 2 or 3 glasses of liqueurs, decreed that Drosselmeyer and the astronomer should start off immediately and not come back without the Nutcracker took in their pockets. The man who was to crack it, by the Queen's suggestion, might be heard of by means of advertisements in the local and foreign newspapers and gazettes. Godpapa Drosselmeyer interrupted his story at this point, and promised to finish it on the following evening.